You're listening to the Well Woman podcast. I'm your host, Jema, women's menstrual cycle educator, natural fertility coach, and daytime mermaid. This is a place where we discuss all things periods, poo, ovulation, fertility, and sex. Join me weekly as we rediscover our menstrual cycles, unlock its superpowers, and guide you back into your cyclical nature. Dr. Leigha, welcome back again, and I should say again and again, to the Well Woman podcast. It's wonderful to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Jema. It's always a pleasure to connect and be here.
I love chatting with you. I do have to admit, you're one of a guest I very, very, very much look forward to chatting with. And I'm really honored to have you a part of this pregnancy series because we were just chatting before we hit record. Sleep is such an important topic, and a lot of people just focus on sleep once they've had the baby. And so it's in that postpartum sleep. But what about pregnant women and sleep? So before we get into that, for people who are learning about you and just tuning into this podcast just for this series, who are you, Dr. Leigha? And who are you? And how are you a sleep expert? How did this come about?
Yeah, thank you. I am so obsessed with helping women get better sleep. And where that came from was my own struggle with insomnia and in particular, my postpartum experience. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart. So like many women and people who are pregnant experience through their pregnancy, there's a strong narrative or narratives around all the things, right? What to expect during your pregnancy, what to expect in transitioning into motherhood and postpartum and beyond. And some of those things are positive, but unfortunately, a lot of the time we hand down and share negative narratives from our own challenging experiences. And what I love untangling with women as it relates to their sleep is what are these beliefs that we hold that actually are influencing our every thought and behavior and action? So if we observed our own mothers working themselves to the bone and sacrificing their own health or personal well-being at the convenience or for the well-being of others, they were absolutely doing their best. They were working hard for you and to provide, I have no doubt. And they had the intention of passing on a very strong and positive lesson, right? Work hard and you can provide and you can make a difference and whatnot. But what do? We internalize that lesson as everything has to be hard. Life has to be a struggle. Motherhood has to be a struggle. I'm only worthy. I'm only a good mom. I'm only a good wife. I'm only a good partner. I'm only a good person if I'm pleasing everyone. I'm doing everything for everyone else. And that means my needs and desires are not as important as others. I don't deserve that. It's selfish to take time or put energy into me. And the narrative continues, right?
Yeah, it does.
It goes on and on and on. So most of the women I work with land in my office in person or virtually after 5, 10, 15 plus years of being really tired of doing that and tired of taking care of everyone and everything else and tired of everything feeling hard and tired of everything being a struggle. And they don't even recognize themselves truthfully and will say that I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't even recognize my body. I don't feel good in my body. What happened? Right. And so then we have this beautiful opportunity to untangle those core beliefs, because if you've ever said the words I know what I should do, but I just need to do it, or I'm on and off track, just need to get back on track again. There's a reason why you're not taking the action that you want and need to be taking. And it's rooted in a core belief of perhaps you think you're not worthy of that, or that you don't deserve that, or you're not good enough for that, or it's selfish if you do it, or whatnot. So it's going to seem at first, you're like, what? Aren't we supposed to be talking about sleep? But I promise it comes back to that. And where it comes back is we create beliefs based on what we're taught. Beliefs are just thoughts that you've thought over and over and over again. So when we're taught or told things like, oh, you're pregnant, sucks. Okay. Right. Like, or what, just wait until that happens. This happens. Like, oh, enjoy. What I heard was enjoy your sleep now because you're not going to get it once your baby comes and once you're a mom. And oh, once you're a mom, this, that, and the other. Right. Like, other people paint that picture for us because they're jaded and maybe they haven't done the inner transformational work to be like, to say what we said before we hit record and be like, becoming a mother is the most transformational experience on every single level. Yes.
It's like an ultimate up leveling.
Yeah. And it requires a constant recreation of yourself. Constant. From the moment of conception, like the physical changes that you go through like all the emotional, and then like, yeah, just wait, right? And it's true. But we can look at that from like, oh, a victim mentality and like, why is all of this happening? Or why am I struggling? Or why is this so hard for me? Or, you know, everyone else seems to have it figured out or whatever, or ask a different question and be willing to shift our perception. And I was not there. Like I was not even close. We said like we're such different people now than we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So my youngest is 18 months. My oldest is 5 years. So in becoming a mom the first time, I was so naive. Like I just had no idea. I actually had never changed a diaper either. So like I really in for a learning opportunity. And I was a good sleeper up until that point. And sure, I experienced like the changes to my sleep that are common in pregnancy due to like, getting bigger and uncomfortable and having to pee and all the things. And then once I moved into that postpartum phase and my sleep was uncontrollably interrupted, my son was not a great sleeper. I started to I managed okay in the first bit, but then around the 3-4 month postpartum mark, I returned back to work, which is a common time that babies go through sleep. Some people will call it a regression. Some people will say progression, right? School of thought. So it's like just a classic time when their sleep changes and they're more aware of their environment and are more likely to wake. So this was also when my husband was transitioning into parental leave because I'm self-employed, which meant I didn't get any benefit coverage or like paid leave. I had to create that for myself. So at that point, that had come to an end and I was returning back to managing a clinic, being a doctor, adjusting to life as a new mom, being and still wanting to be a supportive partner and good wife, and also have that time to connect with and support myself. And at one point, in the depths of my sleep deprivation, I couldn't remember the last time I had slept for more than an hour and a half because my sleep was like so constantly broken. And I showed up and I can still remember the morning of like showing up, and my staff, who was also a mom, was like, "How are you?" And I was like, "Hey." And I just started crying because I'm like, I'm so tired. I cannot function. And on a different day, and I can't actually remember if this was before or after, it doesn't matter, but another colleague was like, "Are you okay? Because you don't really seem like yourself." And you know how we usually go through and are like, "How are you?" "Oh, I'm good." "How are you?" "I'm good."
Yeah.
There's something
response.
Yes, autopilot.
Yeah.
There's something magical about pregnancy and motherhood, and what I am excited for through perimenopause and menopause, and I hear women talk about, is like an unveiling.
Yes.
And this loss of tolerance. Like you can see through bullshit and you are unwilling to tolerate it. It's like the mama bear, right? You're like, rawr. And so she asked me, was like, "How are you?" And I was like, "You know what? Today I'm going to say, like, tell the truth." And I was like, "I'm not okay." I'm actually not okay. It is not normal to be trying to do everything that I'm trying to do and uphold like all the balls in the air and be running on like very little to no sleep. I'm so exhausted. I don't feel like I can take care of myself, let alone take care of others. I wake up in the morning in this like stressed, exhausted, anxious state and just pray that like, okay, tonight will be different. Maybe we'll get a bit more sleep. And then I started to develop a lot of anticipatory anxiety about sleep. So even thinking about going to bed, thinking about going to sleep created anxiety because I would worry about how it would go. Right.
Yep.
So then I was, as we always are, presented with an opportunity that never looks like an opportunity. It just looks like a mess. And I remember I worked with my own naturopathic doctor at that time. And and I remember asking her, like, how do I get back to feeling like myself? And she's like, how's your sleep? I'm like, not good. Because once my son started sleeping through the night and more consolidated, I still couldn't, or I would wake up and like anticipate that he would wake up. I would ruminate about things. And so she was like, we got to fix your sleep. Because until that is fixed, like you're not going to feel like yourself. So I was like, okay, fine. And even as a naturopathic doctor, and I think I had been in practice for 5 years at that point, like, bajillion years of school, all the things. I was like, what do I do? I'm sorry, what? Like melatonin, maybe? So that was the start of my journey. And I was like, okay, I actually have no idea what to do, which means I'm not coming close to even supporting my patients if they have a sleep problem. So I started researching and listening to podcasts, and I became so fascinated once I was like willing and could also handle that, because at first I was just like anything about improving your sleep was like offensive to me, because I was like, screw you people who can sleep well. And so I was like, no, okay, I need to do something about this. And I just fell in love with how sleep is the ultimate foundation of our health.
Mm-hmm.
And how if we are not sleeping, we are not healing, we are not living to our fullest potential and capability. Even if you're like, well, this is all I know it to be. I've always been a bad sleeper. I only sleep 4 or 5 hours a night. Imagine how you would feel if you got more, if you're used to operating at that level. The only reason like that is normal or okay for you is because you're tolerating it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started like, I was like, is this Pandora's box? Like, this is magic. Why is no one talking about this? And I started to appreciate also what I feel like we didn't learn. And that's like sleep impacts every single aspect of our health. So it doesn't actually matter if you have like high blood pressure or depression or anxiety or endometriosis or PCOS or it's like if you're not sleeping or if you have one of those conditions, like you're more likely to have difficulty sleeping. So I started looking for colleagues and allies, and I was like, okay, who else is like focusing on this so we can talk and I can understand? And there's like crickets. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to create this thing and like, right? Like gift, right? Total gift. Because how often do we sit in like, woe is me, why me, that happened to me, this sucks, da 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 da. I have spent many hours there. But that most difficult time of my life has actually been my greatest gift and greatest opportunity.
Special. And
so special.
Really special. And like you said, an opportunity, but at the time you're like, what's the opportunity? I can't see any opportunity here. And
of course,
to backtrack exactly where you began with the beliefs, what are the beliefs, that are influencing your thoughts and your behaviors? I think that's a really great question we can ask about so many aspects of our lives, particularly with sleep. And to give everyone an example, and you mentioned perimenopause and menopause and postmenopause.
Mm-hmm.
I think the menstrual cycle and all the changes in the menstrual cycle, whether that's pregnancy, birthing, menarche first period, becoming a woman, going through menopause, there's so much vomit that's put on these experiences. And I call them vomit because a lot of it's shit. And it's not a lived experience. It's often someone else has heard it. So, oh, well, you just wait. Like, you know, even if they're not a parent and they say to you, oh, well, you should really just get as much sleep as you possibly can because you're not going to get any other sleep. It's like, well, that's possible, but it's also possible to get lots of sleep as a parent too. And everyone's experience is different. And I think if we begin looking at, well, what do I really believe? And do I believe that to be true for myself?
Yes.
We can actually start to change the narrative, like you mentioned. So the narrative of sleep is huge. And especially around motherhood, I think there's so much vomit put on that. And yes, every child is different and every child's experience is different and every child's integration into the world is different. And so that plays a role. But let's talk about sleep itself and how important is sleep. So when it comes to pregnancy and conception and preconception, let's start at the beginning. How important do you think having a good night's sleep is for a preconception journey? Because a lot of people, when it comes to preconception, just think about like, well, I just need to know when I'm ovulating and I just need to make sure that I'm taking a prenatal, and I just do that 2 months before I conceive and that's fine, right? So why is sleep also an important aspect in that journey?
So good. Yeah. I wish I had a memory for statistics, so I can't quote statistics, but I do know that it's very clearly defined in the medical literature that if you are getting less than 7 hours of sleep on a regular basis, that's considered sleep deprivation. So when I throw that term out there, people will be like, oh, I must have to be like only getting 2 or 3 hours a night. It's like, no, the average person, or like most, or at least half the population is getting less than 7 hours a night. So when we see that and observe it in populations, you are much more likely to experience like name any disease, infertility or fertility challenges being one of them. And it does come back to cycles and some of the most foundational pieces that we can take for granted or assume to be too simplistic. But even examples of, I think we may have even talked about this on a previous podcast, of like when women are in nature as a group. Like I remember reading a story about like a woman on a boat, or like it was a summer experience or a summer job or something, and they weren't on or exposed to technology or much artificial light. And so they just had the opportunity to be in sync with natural daylight rhythms and darkness and each other. And all of their cycles synced, and all of their cycles synced up with the lunar. Like we can't explain that. Like there's no test, right? So there's that element of like there is so much power in that regular cycle, but I also don't want to be flippant and have anybody walk away or be listening to this and think like, oh, my insomnia is the reason I'm not getting pregnant. It's right. It's all related.
It's one of multiple aspects. And a lot of people try so hard with their food and they try so hard with detoxing, and they just miss the simple thing of like, okay, maybe I just need to spend 45 minutes less scrolling on my phone before I go to bed and buy that time back with nourishment. And people forget that sleep is about, it's like the middle of the night time. It's dark. It's about restoration, rejuvenation, renewal, resting itself. And sleep provides that, like, hence why babies sleep so much, because they're growing and constructing. So anyway, back to you. I took over.
No, and that's true. And that's what I was going to say as well, in terms of like when we sleep, growth hormone is released. When we sleep, there's a different pattern of release of like luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, right? We will see hormonal patterns change and menstrual cycle. Like take shift work, if we need to use a more extreme example. Yeah. Women who work shift work, who are out of sync with a natural daylight cycle and are constantly flip-flopping their body clock, struggle. Women struggle way more than men too. And so what's super interesting is, one example is of workplace accidents. So women are like twice as likely to be involved in a nighttime workplace accident, but the rates of women and men being in a workplace accident during the day are the same.
Wow.
Like I get goosebumps talking about this stuff.
I have goosebumps now.
Right? I know. So when we, and shift work was like the first environmental factor to be validated and recognized by the World Health Organization as like a known and established carcinogen. There's a significant increased rate of breast cancer in particular in women nurses who work shift work. So we know that it plays a role, right? Like our light, dark exposure and the regularity and rhythms of our menstrual cycle, which obviously is going to impact ovulation. So if your cycle is becoming irregular, and that's most likely going to be as it relates to ovulation, it's going to obviously impact your fertility journey too, or at least have the potential to.
Can I add a slice in there for everyone to kind of like help the ball drop a little bit deeper? Is that, a lot of people just think that the menstrual cycle just begins with the ovaries, but it really begins in your brain. And people don't recognize like the HBO, HPG axis. So your hypothalamus communicating with your pituitary gland, and your pituitary gland responds to light. And so without it turning into a different topic on the podcast, you can manipulate your pituitary gland by using light around you to change when you potentially ovulate in your menstrual cycle. You need to work with a very great educator to teach you how to do that individually. It's not something you learn in a group. But when it comes to that, if you just think about the night shift, or you think about at nighttime staying up till 10 o'clock and leaving all the lights on and then turning the lights off immediately and then trying to get to sleep, that's going to impact that. Not to mention your pituitary and your pineal gland are like best friends, and they live very closely together. And they also have very important roles when it comes to sleep. So I think people just think, oh, well, your menstrual cycle is all from the hips down, but it's not. It's so much more. And your body, it's a whole body experience, really.
And ovulation is the main event. We always think so much about the period because it's the obvious, or menstruation because it's the obvious, but like the most amount of energy and recruitment of energy, process, like it's all about ovulation,
and the alignment of all the hormones and the alignment of, do you feel safe and supported in your body? Is your environmental aspect supporting that too? Because it's a whole kettle of fish.
And that's where I would go with the sleep piece. So I often say that sleep is the ultimate gauge of your nervous system.
I like that.
Again, sometimes there's like, specific factors, like your bladder is just full and you need to get up and go pee, right? You're uncomfortable or whatnot. But if we look at that as like, oh, sleep is that gauge of my nervous system, because how often do we go through our day overscheduled, overwhelmed, undersupported, like finding that it's so hard to slow down and take a break, feeling guilty for that. Why? Because of the narrative that we have to burn ourselves, right? To the brink of exhaustion, that we have to give, that we have to people please and whatnot. So if your day is structured like that now, and then you add kids to it, if you figure out a way how to do that, please let me know. I want to know your secrets. But in all seriousness, we just can't sustain that. And we can try our very hardest, but I would put money on that it will show up in a way. And for some people, it shows up as anxiety during the day. For some people, it shows up as insomnia in the night, and sometimes a combination of both or other things. So we are good at distracting ourselves from our thoughts and feelings and emotions and anxieties and worries and whatnot. And
are we ever?
We're
so good at
this. Yeah. So one invitation and a starting point is like, even in this preconception or fertility journey or pregnancy, is to find space now. We often confuse our desire to reach a goal with a need to make a decision. One day when I'm less busy, I will. One day when I have more time.
I'll sleep when I'm dead. That's so
right?
Terrible.
It's terrible. But important to recognize, because maybe that's what you learned about sleep too. Maybe you learned that, you sleep when you're dead. If you sleep in, you're lazy. Sleep is for, weak people, badge of honor. If like who's running on the least amount of sleep, right? So think about what that creates. It creates this like guilt around taking a break. And there's no way that your nervous system and body is going to feel safe at the end of the day or comfortable or familiar with the idea of not just slowing down, but actually stopping and being at peace for 8 hours. Right, like I don't mean to be again flippant about it, but sometimes we just need to be radically honest.
Yep.
And the question that I always come back to is like, for what? Like, why are we killing ourselves at the convenience of others? And what are we hoping to teach our own children in that? So, like, if you can appreciate or begin to be curious or open yourself to some of those patterns or beliefs, and this can happen like in very healthy family dynamics. This happens in the parents who love their children very much and are again doing their best and have unconditional love and happy, healthy, functional homes. This isn't only for the dysfunctional and like toxic or childhood adverse events, right? It's
Yep.
the subtle ways. And so if we aren't conscious of these patterns and belief, we're going to inherit them. We're going to embody them. We're going to repeat them. And then we're going to continue to teach that to our children.
There's so much in that. I just want to highlight there's so much in that. And it just goes to show, like, we could talk about being great role models with sleep, but maybe you haven't had the role model with sleep. There's also, I hate using this term, Leigha, but like the hustle culture for women.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially if you're pregnant and you're the person growing the baby, there's no one else in the relationship that can grow the baby. Like, it's you.
Yeah.
But you still have to uphold all of this. So at the time I'm recording this episode, I'm almost 6 months pregnant, and I'm sorry, I'm almost in my 6th month. It's so weird, all the terminologies and the timeframes. Anyway, and I have said multiple times to people, I don't know how people live with fatigue. I don't know how people move through pregnancy with a full-time job, because I'm fortunate enough that I could move parts of my day to be like, you know what? It's 12:30. I need to have a 2 o'clock. I need to have a 2-hour nap. I need to sleep because I'm just falling asleep at my computer in the middle of the day because my body's so exhausted, because I'm so fatigued, because I did call the baby a leech once and Brenton wasn't very happy. I was like, it's like a leech. It's sucking the life out of me. I need to rest. But the old me 10 years ago would have been like, oh no, push through. You can break through the barrier. And so there's so much in that. And I think it's great education that people focus on eating the right foods when they're pregnant, or moving their body, or making sure they get all of the work done. So when the baby comes, they can have a bit more time off, but sleep's so important, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about sleep through pregnancy. Maybe let's
Mm-hmm.
focus on each of the 3 different trimesters.
Sure. Yeah.
What does it look like? And what is the different changes that the body's going through hormonally through pregnancy? Because it's very different to outside of pregnancy.
The first trimester is often accompanied by that overwhelming fatigue and increased sleep drive. And
Not
it's
good.
almost instantaneous, right? You're like, I peed on the stick and I found out I'm pregnant, and wow, I'm really tired. And it's real, and it's like a different level of fatigue for many women, like you described, like, hold on, like full stop, cannot function, need to go and nap. So it is also really interesting because when you're forced almost into that, right? Like, you'll listen if the symptom is loud enough, if the discomfort is loud enough, you'll listen.
Mm-hmm.
So for most women, based on the hormone changes and that huge surge in progesterone that starts to happen in particular in the first trimester, as well as the blood volume changes, because your blood volume doubles in the first trimester. And while that's happening, you're relatively anemic, even if you haven't lost blood, right? Because your blood is just becoming thinner, and your heart rate and your nervous system is working harder already, right? Because you've got more blood volume, but not necessarily, like, it takes about 3 or 4 months for your actual red blood cell production to catch up. That's what is carrying the oxygen, right? So even when you're feeling like short of breath or weak or tired in the first trimester, and you're like, there's no way this can be happening. It's like, no, it's happening. And that's why.
Already so
And
fast?
it's amazing.
Mm.
It's so amazing. And with that, some women are basically able to lean in and maybe more willing to lean in, or like you said, fortunate enough to have that experience of like, okay, this is just what needs to happen. But we aren't always familiar with the idea of listening to our body, right? Because like you said, we're used to pushing through, we're used to figuring it out. So that can also be really hard for some women to like surrender. When I said that becoming a mother is like the most transformative experience, it's also a massive surrender experiment of like, you cannot control, right? Like so many things. And I feel like there was something else I wanted to say about first trimester sleep, but it's escaping me.
Well,
Maybe
whilst
it'll
you're
come back.
finding the escapee, I think in that first trimester, there's two ways. Like the shamanic way of looking at pregnancy is that everything that comes to the surface through your pregnancy is teaching you what you need to know for your birth and your transition into motherhood. So if that is sleep, it's sleep. If that is learning how to nourish yourself with food, as opposed to just, I'm pregnant, I should just eat all the junk food. Like my partner said, I can't wait for the day I come home and you're eating a 4 liter, which is a big tub of ice cream, on your belly and eating McDonald's. I was like, dude, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But that's the narrative, So I think people forget that what's arising right now is a lesson that you're going to need to learn to be able to become the mother that you need to be for the baby you're growing. So there's that shamanic aspect of it, but also something that was really highlighted to me in first trimester was the surrender, but also asking for help. And whether that's help that someone gives you for free, like a sibling comes and does something for free for you, or you buy it, it's still asking for help. It does not matter. I think people forget, like, I wanted to prioritize going to bed earlier. I didn't want to have to stay up and do all the dishes and make meals after working throughout the day. So I'm going to pre-order meals and have them delivered to my house. So like just little things like that can make a big difference to make a shift in the priority of something that's really important for you. So thanks for sharing. Double blood volume, definitely a thing. Being short of breath, definitely a thing. Great to know. So that's anything else for first trimester before we move on to the second trimester?
I think that's good. Yeah. I think it encompasses most experiences.
And I think people forget, I was quite shocked I knew this in my mind, but I was shocked to visually see it. So we've done one scan in our pregnancy, and that was the middle scan that we chose to do, and the middle of pregnancy scan. And I was so surprised. I knew it, like in my mind, I know that this happens. But when I saw it, I was like, holy fuck. So my body has built 2 lungs, 2 kidneys, stomach, a brain, skin, eyes, lips, bones, little muscles.
I know.
It was such a humbling reminder seeing that, to be like, so that's what my whole first trimester was doing. It was growing all of that. Well, that explains why I was so tired and things were shifting. So,
and we're so used to validating ourselves on an external level based on how productive we are in a day, what we have to show. And the surrender and the challenge of the first trimester is like, I'm really tired and I feel like I have nothing to show for it, but actually I grew a lung today.
Totally.
Right. And we don't, it's hard. It is really hard to like appreciate that or bring that into your conscious awareness, because it's happening without you even thinking about it.
And you can't visually see it. It's not like a trophy you can put on your desk to be like, this is what
Exactly.
I did today. It's not a list you can check off.
Yeah. So that is really what's so fascinating about, I think, the first trimester. And then for most women, like the second is where they feel their best, most commonly. Like you hit that sweet spot. For me, it was around 14, 16 weeks in both pregnancies. Like I was lucky I didn't suffer a lot with nausea, and the fatigue lifts, like it was almost like a fog was lifted. I was getting great sleep, and because you're so comfortable for the most part. Around week 18 to 20 is when the baby starts building its skeleton. It's borrowing all of your calcium. It's a leech.
See, I told you, babe. It's literally a leech.
So it's utilizing your stored calcium from your muscles and bones. So a common symptom is leg cramps. Have you had those yet?
Not too much, but I know personally I sit on a higher intake of calcium than the average. Like I probably do a higher dose, and I've done that for years. Like close to a decade, I've taken higher calcium. And I know a lot of women really have much, like, isn't the stat like between 80 and 95% of women are deficient in calcium?
I would believe it.
Like huge amounts. And so for me, I know, especially because I haven't been a dairy consumer pre-pregnancy for years, that was an important thing for me. I knew I had to get externally, and obviously eating lots of leafy greens, etc. So I haven't had that too much.
Right.
But I know that a lot of women do get that. And
well, it's just, again, it exemplifies how our pregnancy journeys can be so different. And yes, it's a common thing, but doesn't mean it's normal. So we always want to look at those pieces of like, well, what might be disturbing your sleep? And is it something noticeable and physical, like a full bladder? Do you need to change or alter your fluid intake? Or do you now need to sleep with a pillow between your legs? Because that helps your low back and hips. Is it now introducing a supplement of calcium or CalMag in addition to your prenatal, so that you're still replenishing what's being borrowed from you, because you're waking up with, we call them Charlie horses. Do you call them that?
No, what is this? Tell me more.
I don't know where that came from. It's just like, if you've ever had like that wicked calf muscle, like seized.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah.
We call them Charlie horses.
Oh, wow. No,
I don't know why.
We don't do that down under. That's a new thing.
That's what we say in Canada.
Yeah, that's so. No, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
it's just one of those things that could be worth considering, or if you're like trying to do all the things right and be preventative, especially in nature. And then the third trimester is where women will struggle because mostly of like, yes, hormone related changes, but those hormones creating more laxity in our joints, and that can create more like hip and pelvic floor, knee pain, discomfort, bladder, right? Like your bladder is being continuously smushed. So those are all very real things that we can do our best from that external environment, most likely, to control or support. One of the things that's really important to highlight, though, is that if you have difficulty sleeping and symptoms of insomnia, so the medical definition of insomnia is typically struggling with either taking more than 30 minutes to fall asleep or being awake for more than 30 minutes over the course of the night at one time. So like you wake up to go pee, and then when you come back, it takes you more than a half an hour to fall asleep for 3 or more nights a week for 3 months. So obviously pregnancy is like a shorter time period, so it might be a little bit challenging to track that. And like, we don't want to wait 3 months, but most people will start to notice a more significant sleep disturbance, or people who have pre-pregnancy sleep concerns and insomnia are much more likely to experience pregnancy related sleep disturbances. And then those people, or people who have sleep disturbances in pregnancy, are then much more likely to suffer postpartum.
Sleep disturbances.
Yeah, and insomnia. And then postpartum insomnia and sleep disturbances significantly increase risk for things like postpartum anxiety and depression. So we want to be like really mindful about these components. And the reason I listed that diagnostic kind of description there is that it's really important that we move away from collapsing things in medicine. And what we do in many cases is say like, oh, you're anxious or you're stressed, or you have a chronic pain disorder or neurological disorder, or like you name it, and you have trouble sleeping because of the other thing that's more obvious. right? Louder, like creates more discomfort or complication in your health and history. So that might be true. We certainly can't completely separate them. But what we're understanding more and more in sleep medicine is there's no longer the use of the terms primary and secondary insomnia. So primary would be like, we can't otherwise explain this. You have difficulty sleeping. Secondary insomnia would have been like, you have a pre-existing condition and you have trouble sleeping and your insomnia is secondary. So if we fix, air quotes, the condition, then
sleep
theoretically
should pattern itself out.
Yeah. But what we really understand, and this is observed in the study of pregnancy and postpartum sleep related disturbances and insomnia too, is that it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you have the thing, the other condition. It doesn't matter if you're pregnant or if you're going through your fertility journey or if you're in your postpartum. If you have trouble sleeping, we need to stop dismissing the reason or like making an excuse and just treat the sleep issue.
So important. And how would you, like, let's talk about sleep in like this sleep disturbances and insomnia whilst pregnant. What are some things that you could do to support that, or as you mentioned, treat that?
Yeah.
That people can do at home to give a go.
Totally. So when we look at things like behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is actually the primary thing, it's all about understanding how your cognitions influence your behaviors and how that creates your outcome and result, right? So when we're looking at something like sleep in pregnancy at any point in the trimester or 3 trimesters, we want to understand like what are your behaviors and thoughts around sleep as well. So are you connecting with your body and listening and recognizing like, oh, I'm tired, I do need to prioritize sleep. And maybe what I wanted to say earlier was along the line of like, yes, you are fortunate, Jema, to have been able to create that shift in your schedule and take that nap, but you also created that and worked damn hard to get there. And you made a choice, and we all make choices. And sometimes we make the choice not to choose. But we need to recognize that that's a choice too. And it's actually hard either way. Like that's what I want to say the most is like, it's hard when we're living that life of like in the toxic relationship or toxic job and we're not sleeping because of it. And it's also hard to make the choices to get out of the toxic job or the lack of fulfillment, right, in the job or the relationship or whatever. But what if that is the thing that helps you sleep better at night? Right. And when we lose that tolerance or our filter is like maybe lifted ever so slightly, if we're willing to have a shift in perception in these different life stages, then in pregnancy, it's a beautiful opportunity to examine some of those things. Right. So if sleep is that ultimate gauge of your nervous system and now you're waking up to pee, but then end up ruminating or worrying or like having repetitive thoughts about things that are on your mind, that's okay. That's actually exactly what you need to work on and examine and sit with and be curious with, as difficult and challenging as that might be.
There's so much in that. There really
and
is.
I wish
There you go.
I wish it was like, well, just do this thing. Like,
yeah.
Right. Just unplug. Just turn off your phone. That's it.
And, you know, something that a great mentor of mine taught me years ago is that it's easy to do, but it's also easier not to do. So, you know, it's easy to go to bed early, but it's also easy not to go to bed early. And I think it just comes back to, I feel, is that how you approach your pregnancy and the lessons that are coming up for you in your pregnancy are opportunities for you to put yourself first right now before you can't put yourself first. And if you can help support them, and that means that you do ask for help or you surrender or you let go of something, like the list can wait, you know, like the work can wait. And it's just, it's not a forever thing. It's just a right now thing. And so how can you make it wait just 2 days, not forever, just waiting just a little bit, or wait 5 hours to reply to that email so that you can go and have a little nap, or you can take some time to sit outside and quiet your nervous system. And I think people forget that however you feel or whatever you're feeling, however your nervous system is right now, that's also the same nervous system the body's receiving. Sorry, the baby's receiving.
Yes.
So it's, if I'm having an emotional breakdown, the baby's feeling my emotional breakdown. If I'm feeling trauma, my baby's feeling trauma. If I'm feeling exhausted, my baby could feel exhausted. And so that's the beautiful journey of pregnancy, I feel, is that it's learning to be the mother. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Do you know what I think this is actually about? This is about surrendering and almost being forced into the feminine, the divine feminine, right? When you are pregnant, it is so loud and in your face and in your body, right? Like truly growing and nurturing another human being, and like the incredible body changes that occur. Love your breasts now and after, but especially love them now. But like I felt so feminine, and I think that was the loss of tolerance. Like that was the, like, I am in my truth, my authentic self. I cannot hold anything else because I'm not even willing to entertain it, because I have this incredible human being inside of me who I want to love and nourish and grow, and will do anything to like protect and serve. But it does not serve them if you sacrifice yourself in the meantime. Or to create that. You're going to hear my little guy in the background right now.
Yeah, it's all part of the pregnancy series.
It's all part of it. But yeah, can I add one thing on top of that?
Yes, before we wrap up.
But we are so used to, mommy. We are so used to, as women, operating in our masculine energy. We are so used to being productive, like we talked about, right? Showing up in the way that we're supposed to, whatever that is, like a traditional 9-to-5 schedule, responding right away to the email or the text, or like doing the thing, producing the thing, putting ourselves out there, not just showing up the same as yesterday, but actually it should be better, right? Like, and you deeply know this, we operate on that 28-day cycle, and in pregnancy it shifts, and it's not like men who operate on a different time schedule and cycle. And so the opportunity there is to like reconnect and really lean into, I think, that feminine nature. And I think that there's like a little bit more willingness to do that in pregnancy because of what's happening. And it's an incredibly beautiful thing. And when you do that, and when you are curious about what the feminine is, and what that can be for you, and how that can help you feel more whole, right? And can make you feel like you're showing up as your best self to be the best mom, wife, partner, person you want to be. That's what actually creates resilience in your kids.
Yeah.
Who you can probably hear in the background. But like that is what creates resilience, because I can show up as this podcast. So I'm in Canada, and it's at 7 p.m. now. So we're moving into like bedtime. Is it 8 a.m. for you, Jema? 9 a.m. Right. So the reason I can do this is because I'm willing to accept help from my incredible husband, who took the kids out for an hour so we could have this important conversation. And what did my son ask me? Mommy, can you just come outside for a bit? And I was like, no, but I got a work call. But after this call, I'm going to sit with him. I'm going to tell him, like, do you know that I talked with somebody in Australia tonight? And he's going to find that so cool. And he's going to feel so proud of me and so excited. And like, now I get to give him permission to do and create his life on his terms, what he feels most fulfilled and excited by, right? So yes, if you are going through fatigue and exhaustion and stress and anxiety and trauma in your pregnancy, you don't stress too much over the stress, because babies and kids are inherently so resilient. And there is still lots of time and opportunity to teach them love, and like you will just be their greatest comfort, as you can hear. So it's an incredible journey. And like, yeah, we could talk about all the things in the behavioral pieces, which are really important. But I love how you had the angle of like, it's easy to stay up and it's easy to go to bed. That's actually such a much more of a positive spin of like, it's hard to do that or hard to, right? But I think the difference, like why do some people find it easier to do the easy thing that they feel called to, is because they're like willing to just like to show up for themselves.
Mm. Yeah, you're spot on. And I think it's also the allowing yourself to shift and evolve and change, as opposed to being the static same all the time. Like, men are the static and the same, whereas women are ever evolving. And I think that the more that we can adapt into that, I think we can also remember that pregnancy is a preparation for birth, and how you turn up in your pregnancy, how you allow, how you surrender will be demonstrated in your birth altar and your birth portal as you enter that birthing space. So yeah, there's so much in that. And I think, to summarize for sleep, is to listen to your body. I think that it really comes down to that. And if you're not pregnant yet and you have the intention to be pregnant in the future, whether that's in a month's time, a year's time, 10 years time, is to track your menstrual cycle and start listening to your body, so that when it comes to listening to your body through pregnancy, you have a much louder ear. Like, you hear everything much, much more intently. Dr. Leigha, this has been amazing. And I know the kids are calling. So how can everybody connect with you and find you and learn more about you if they're like, holy moly, who is this Canadian woman?
Yeah, come hang out on Instagram. I'm sure you'll have everything linked up on the show notes. So my first name is Leigha, Leigha, and I'll just leave it to you to link me in all the places. But I'm most active and engaged on Instagram, and we can link my website and tools and resources that I have for people there.
Mm-hmm.
I want to leave your listeners with something practical to like,
Please.
not just leave like feeling, okay, great, I gotta go and do all this stuff, like inner work. So one of the most important things we see in sleep medicine is keeping a consistent wake up time. So that can be really challenging, especially if you've had a poor night's sleep. But what it does is help establish and anchor your circadian rhythm. And if you keep a consistent wake up time, even after a bad night's sleep, you're more likely to fall asleep easier, faster that night, and to stay asleep the following night. So this is not necessarily applicable to that postpartum phase where it's like, get the sleep when you can, if you can, like, don't worry about that. But in pregnancy, if you're struggling and not sleeping well, yes, we need to like listen to our body and get rest, but creating some consistency for you might be indicated, because consistency also helps regulate our nervous system. Predictability helps regulate our nervous system. So that is one piece. And for some reason, we're often taught, again, I think it's that parenting and like bedtime for kids is such a predictable and consistent time, that we translate that into adulthood and think like, oh, I need to be in bed and asleep by a certain time. But I always like to say, like, we can force ourselves to wake up and get up. It's hard, but we can do that. We can never actually force ourselves to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Right.
So true.
So it's more important for you to pick that consistent wake up time and have that. And then recognize when you're tired in the evening. And that is that feeling of sleep pressure, which maybe is more familiar if you've recently been like for you in your first trimester, like your eyes are heavy, your head is heavy, you could quickly fall asleep. It's better that you stay up a bit late because you've done intentional decompression. You've had a chance to unwind from your day, or you're doing something that feels fulfilling, like reading a book or journaling or whatever, rather than just getting into bed because it's a certain time. And then when we pair that in with like waking up at a consistent time and getting morning light and decreasing the overhead lights in the evening and connecting back with darkness and, reading under low lighting instead of being on our phones, like, it's not just one thing, it's how it all interrelates. And then when you're in that evening piece, like you spoke of putting your phone down, like now it's one way of moving away from looking for that external gratification, external validation, which we are just on all the time, to being like, actually, what do I need in my body right now? And when you practice that, because it is a practice, it might feel uncomfortable at first, you learn how to trust your body and what it's asking for. And most of us and many of the women who I work with really need to heal our trust with ourselves. We could do a whole podcast episode on that. Anyways,
maybe we will in the future.
When you are a mother and your time is more in demand, then you will be that like choice piece becomes much more, you have to be quicker at making the choices, I think is what I want to say, of like, I need something and this is the only time that I have to do it. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Right. So practice listening, responding, following through, and it becomes easier over and over. Glennon Doyle, the author of Untamed, says, as she explains what she likes to call our inner knowing or your intuition, it's like your goal is to listen to the knowing and follow through on the doing and shorten the time it takes in between over and over and over.
I love that.
It's not verbatim, but it's the essence is there. So I will leave you with that.
Well, that is it. And I just want to say thank you so much. It's easy to do. It's also easy not to do. So you get to choose which aspect you want to follow there. Dr. Leigh, you're amazing. And I know everyone's gained so much from this beautiful chat about sleep and all things around sleep, our behavior and our beliefs. So thank you for being here again and again and again. It's such an honor and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into every episode of the Well Woman podcast. For everything we mentioned in today's episode, you can find this in the show notes over at wellsome.com/podcast. If this episode excited you, please hit follow on Spotify, which means all of my episodes will pop up in your feed weekly so you never miss a weekly drop. I'd love you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts too. Love this episode? Come and follow me over on Instagram at wellsome_Jema Leigh. Say hi and share what you've taken away from this episode with me. Now, is there a bestie, sister, or a friend who you know who might be fed up, frustrated, and confused with their cycles? Are they ready to join you in awakening their cyclical essence too? Well, take a screenshot of this podcast episode, share it on your socials, email it, text it, or any way you need to get it to them. So together we can all live in flow, harmony, and balance with our cycles. Now, until next time, beautiful, get connected, listen to your body, and remember, body confidence all begins with living in tune with your menstrual cycle.